The ghost in the lobby. The Grand Lotus Hotel gleamed like a cathedral of glass and gold, its marble floors reflecting the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Choi Sung-ho stood near the elevator bank, adjusting a platinum cufflink, when the world stopped spinning. She was there. Sade. His dead wife. His buried wound. His unfinished war. She moved through the lobby like a quiet storm, still graceful, still devastating, still his even after 5 years of silence. But it wasn't her presence that stopped his heart. It was the 3 small figures holding her hands. Identical faces. Identical curls. Identical eyes that looked exactly like the one staring from his own reflection. 3 children. His jaw tightened. His tattooed knuckles whitened against his cufflink. She had secrets. And he had just discovered every single one. Sometimes the people we lose aren't really gone. Sometimes they're just hiding, waiting for fate to drag the truth into the light. Please like, share, and subscribe. The Sovereign's Return. 5 years earlier, Seoul. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Choi estate like nature itself was trying to break through. Inside, 23-year-old Sade Adebayo stood in the master bedroom, her suitcase open on the bed, her hands trembling as she folded silk blouses she'd never wanted. The door opened without warning. Choi Sung-ho entered like smoke, silent, inevitable, consuming. His dark-tailored suit absorbed the dim lamplight. The traditional Korean-Nigerian fusion tattoo crawling up his neck seemed to pulse with barely contained fury. "You're packing." It wasn't a question. Sade didn't turn around. "I'm leaving." "No." The single syllable carried more weight than 100 arguments. She heard his footsteps, measured, controlled, predatory. Then she felt his presence behind her, close enough that his breath stirred the baby hairs at her nape. "You belong here," he said quietly. "You belong to me." Sade closed her eyes. The pregnancy test in her pocket burned like a confession she couldn't make. Not to him. Not when his world was built on blood and calculated violence. Not when his enemies would use any weakness to destroy him. Including their unborn children. "I don't belong anywhere," she whispered. "Especially not in your cage." She expected rage. Expected him to grip her arm and spin her around, to unleash the terrifying dominance that made powerful men kneel and governments tremble. Instead, silence. When she finally turned, Sung-ho stood completely still. His expression was carved from granite, cold, unreadable, devastating. But his eyes looked shattered. "Then go," he said softly. "Burn everything. Disappear. But understand this, Sade." He stepped closer. "I will never stop looking." Present day, Lagos, Nigeria. The scent of fresh bread filled Sade's small bakery like a warm embrace. She wiped flour-dusted hands on her apron, watching her 3 children through the kitchen window as they played in the courtyard behind the shop. Adora sat cross-legged in the shade, reading a picture book about Korean folktales. Kento was building a tower from wooden blocks, his little brow furrowed in concentration that reminded her painfully of someone else. And Amora, her wild one, was attempting to climb the mango tree despite being told 17 times that morning not to. "Amora Adebayo, get down from there." The 5-year-old grinned, a smile that stopped Sade's heart every single time because it was his smile. Sharp. Knowing. Already too clever for her own good. "But Mama, I can see the whole world from here." "You can see the whole world from the ground too." "Down. Now." Amora descended with dramatic reluctance. Sade shook her head, turning back to her bread dough, trying to ignore the familiar ache in her chest. 5 years. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of building this quiet life far from Seoul's glittering darkness. 5 years of loving 3 small humans who carried pieces of a man she'd never stopped dreaming about. The bell above the bakery door chimed. "We're not open yet," Sade called without looking up. "Come back at." Actually, "Madam, I was hoping you could make an exception." The voice was Korean. Polished. Eerily familiar. Sade turned slowly. A man in an expensive grey suit stood in her doorway. His smile was pleasant, professional. But his eyes were scanning the shop with military precision, cataloguing exits, assessing threats, noting the children's drawings taped to the walls. She knew that look. She'd seen it on Sung-ho's security team 1,000 times. "Who are you?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "My name is Park Jin-woo. I represent the Hanyul conglomerate. We're scouting locations for a new African expansion, and your bakery was recommended." Lies. All lies. She could taste them like ash on her tongue. Hanyul conglomerate was one of Sung-ho's legitimate fronts. "I'm not interested in investors. Perhaps you should hear our offer before." I said no. Sade moved toward the door, her body positioning itself between this stranger and the window where her children played. "Please leave." Jin-woo's pleasant mask flickered. Just for a moment. Then he smiled, bowed politely, and handed her a business card. "In case you change your mind, Mrs. Choi." He was gone before she could respond to the name she hadn't used in 5 years. Sade's hands were shaking so violently she dropped the card twice before shoving it into her apron pocket. He knew. Somehow, Sung-ho knew. The hotel. 3 weeks later, Lagos. The International Commerce Summit brought the world's elite to Lagos for one glittering week. Politicians, billionaires, tech moguls, and, beneath the polished surface, the shadow leaders who actually controlled global economies. Choi Sung-ho arrived at the Grand Lotus Hotel with the quiet inevitability of a coming storm. His entourage was minimal: 2 bodyguards, his assistant, and his most trusted advisor, a silver-haired Korean woman named Madame Kwon who had served his family for 3 decades. The hotel staff bowed as he passed, conditioned by his reputation to fear even his silence. The lobby gleamed with marble and crystal. Politicians greeted him with nervous smiles. Businessmen offered desperate handshakes. A European diplomat's wife watched him with obvious interest that he ignored completely. Sung-ho cared about none of it. His mind was still processing Jin-woo's report from 3 weeks ago. She's alive. Lagos. Running a bakery. And sir, there are children. How many? 3. Triplets. Approximately 5 years old. 5 years old. The math had destroyed him more thoroughly than any enemy ever could. She'd been pregnant when she left. She'd been pregnant, and she'd run. His fingers flexed unconsciously, the intricate tattoo across his knuckles, intertwined Adinkra symbols and Korean geometric patterns, stretching with the movement. His security team had wanted to arrange an immediate extraction. Madame Kwon had suggested patience, strategy, control. Sung-ho had chosen something else entirely. The summit. Lagos. A legitimate reason to be in the same city. And then. So. His assistant materialized at his elbow. Your suite is prepared. The opening reception begins in 2 hours. Sung-ho nodded, moving toward the elevators. That's when he saw her. Sade emerged from the hotel's conference wing, her natural hair twisted into an elegant updo, wearing a simple cream dress that made her dark skin glow like burnished bronze. She was speaking with a hotel manager, clearly there for some catering consultation. But it wasn't her presence that stopped him. It was the 3 small figures clustered around her legs like satellites orbiting their sun. One girl was holding her mother's hand, studying the lobby's architecture with analytical intensity. One boy stood slightly apart, his posture already proud and controlled despite his age. And one girl, clearly the troublemaker, was trying to convince her siblings to race toward the fountain in the lobby center. Sung-ho felt every drop of blood drain from his face. They looked like him. The sharp angle of their jaws. The knowing darkness of their eyes. The particular way the little boy held himself, contained, watchful, already too aware of the world around him. Mine, something primal roared inside his chest. Mine, mine, mine. Sade turned, perhaps sensing the weight of his stare. Their eyes met across the gleaming marble expanse. Time fractured. 5 years of silence. 5 years of searching. 5 years of wondering if she was dead or simply done with him collapsed into a single moment of devastating recognition. Sade's face went white. Her arms moved instinctively, gathering all 3 children closer as if she could shield them from his gaze with her body alone. Sung-ho didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't breathe. He simply stood there, marble still, predator patient, and let her see exactly what her disappearance had cost him. Then, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It was the coldest expression she'd ever seen on a human face. The confrontation. Sade's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for escape. Run, her instinct screamed. Take the children and run. But where? He was here. In Lagos. In her city, her safe haven, the last place she'd thought he would ever find her. Mama. Adora tugged at her dress. Mama, who is that man? Why is he looking at us? No one, baby. He's no one. The lie tasted like poison. Sung-ho was still watching. Still smiling that terrible smile. His bodyguards had materialized behind him like shadows taking form, but he made no move to approach. He didn't need to. He knew, she could see it in his eyes. He knew the truth, or at least suspected it strongly enough that denial would be useless. We need to go, Sade murmured, steering her children toward the nearest exit. Come on, quickly. Mrs. Choi. His voice carried across the lobby like a blade. Low. Controlled. Absolutely devastating. Hotel staff paused. Guests turned. Even her children looked up at the unfamiliar name. Sade froze. Sung-ho approached with measured steps, each one echoing against the marble like a countdown to detonation. He stopped exactly 3 feet away, close enough to tower over her, far enough to appear civilized. You look well, he said quietly. For a dead woman. I'm not, she swallowed. I never claimed to be dead. No. You simply disappeared. Burned our marriage documents. Erased every trace of your existence. His dark eyes flickered to the children, then back to her face. Almost every trace. Kento stepped forward, positioning his small body between his mother and this unknown threat. The gesture was so painfully familiar, so exactly like something Sung-ho himself would do, that Sade's heart cracked. You're scaring my mama, Kento said. His voice was steady. Brave. Foolish. Stop it. Something shifted in Sung-ho's expression. For one brief moment, the mask cracked. Beneath the cold fury and calculated control, Sade glimpsed something she'd almost forgotten he was capable of. Wonder. Your son, he said slowly, is very protective. They all are. Sade pulled Kento back gently. Please. Not here. Not in front of them. Then where? His voice dropped lower. Where would you like to have this conversation, Sade? In the bakery you thought I wouldn't find? In the apartment where you've raised my children without me? You don't know there. Don't. The word was soft. Lethal. Don't insult us both with lies. Not after everything. Sade's eyes burned with unshed tears. There's a cafe on the 3rd floor, she whispered. Tonight. 8 o'clock. I'll explain everything. You'll explain nothing I don't already know. Sung-ho leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, the sandalwood scent of him flooding her senses with unwanted memories. But I'll listen anyway. Because despite everything you've done, despite every law you've broken and every vow you've shattered. His lips brushed her temple. The contact lasted less than a second. I still can't seem to let you go. Then he turned and walked away. Sade didn't move for a long moment. Mama. Amara tugged her hand. Mama, are you crying? No, baby. She wiped her face quickly. Mama just has something in her eye. Lies, she thought bitterly. More lies. But what choice did she have? Ghosts and memories. That evening, the cafe. The rooftop cafe overlooked Lagos's glittering skyline, city lights reflecting off the ocean like scattered diamonds. Sade arrived first, choosing a corner table where she could watch both entrances. She'd left the children with Mama Ngozi, her neighbor and closest friend, the only person in Lagos who knew pieces of her past. Not all of it. Never all of it. But enough to understand why Sade was trembling as she smoothed her simple black dress. He found you, Mama Ngozi had said, reading the fear in Sade's eyes. The father? Yes. And you're going to meet him? Alone? I don't have a choice. The older woman had studied her for a long moment, then pressed a small charm into her palm. For courage. And if he tries anything foolish, aim for the eyes. Sade clutched that charm now, its worn edges digging into her palm. The cafe's entrance opened. Sung-ho entered like he owned the building, which, she realized with sudden horror, he probably did. His suit was fresh, charcoal gray, tailored so perfectly it seemed painted onto his powerful frame. The tattoo on his neck was partially visible above his collar, the geometric pattern seeming to shift in the dim lighting. He scanned the room once. Found her. Didn't smile. You came, he said, taking the seat across from her. You didn't give me much choice. You had 5 years of choices, Sade. This, he gestured between them. This is consequence. A waiter approached. Sung-ho ordered in flawless Korean accented English without looking at the menu. When they were alone again, he simply watched her. Sade forced herself not to fidget. Ask your questions, she said finally. I only have one. He leaned forward, and suddenly the 3-foot table between them felt like inches. Are they mine? The word mine hit her like a physical blow. Yes. She'd expected anger. Rage. The cold fury she'd seen in the lobby. Instead, Sung-ho closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. I have 3 children, he said quietly, as if testing the words. I have 3 children, and I have never held them. Never heard their first words. Never watched them take their first steps. Never? His voice cracked. Sade reached across the table instinctively, then stopped herself. You have to understand, she whispered. Your world, our world, it was killing me. The constant danger. The enemies who would use any weakness against you. I found out I was pregnant the same week your father tried to have me killed. Sung-ho went absolutely still. What? He never told you. Sade laughed bitterly. Of course he didn't. The great Choi Jae-won, determined to purify his bloodline. He gave me 2 choices, to abort the pregnancy and stay, or disappear and live. My father has been dead for 3 years. I know. She met his eyes. I also know he had surveillance on me for 18 months after I left. Every time I thought about reaching out, I'd find one of his men watching my building. Watching the clinic where I gave birth. Watching the children. And after he died. By then, the children were 2 years old. They had a life here. A safe, quiet, normal life. Tears slipped down her cheeks. What was I supposed to do, Sung-ho? Call you and say, surprise, you're a father, please don't let your criminal empire destroy our babies. He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and produced something that stopped her heart. A photograph. It showed her in the hospital, exhausted and radiant, 3 tiny infants arranged across her chest. She remembered that day, remembered the nurse who'd taken the picture, remembered thinking she'd never been so happy and so terrified in her entire life. My father kept records, Sung-ho said quietly. I found them after his death. Photographs. Medical reports. Surveillance logs. He documented everything, including the threats he made to ensure your silence. Sade stared at the photo. You knew. For 3 years. The words hit her like ice water. You knew for 3 years and you never. I thought you wanted to be free. His voice was raw. I thought you'd chosen to leave, and I was trying to respect that choice. Even if it destroyed me. Then why now? Why come here, why? Because I finally read the letters. Sade's blood ran cold. What letters? Sung-ho produced a small bundle of envelopes, tied with faded ribbon. She recognized her own handwriting on the front. Letters she'd written to him before she knew the danger. Letters she'd burned the morning she fled. My father intercepted your correspondence for months before you left, Sung-ho said. These were in his safe. Love letters. Plans for our future. Your hopes for the children you were carrying. He spread them across the table like evidence in a trial. You didn't betray me, Sade. You didn't choose to leave. You were forced out, and I spent 5 years believing you never loved me at all. The silence between them stretched like a wound. I burned the proof, Sade whispered. Everything connecting me to you. I thought it was the only way to protect them. But I found the truth anyway. Sung-ho reached across the table. This time, she didn't pull away when his tattooed fingers closed around hers. The question is, what do we do now? Ghosts in the dark. The cafe seemed to shrink around them, the universe condensing to the space between their joined hands. I don't know, Sade admitted. I've spent 5 years building a life here. The children have friends, routines, a community. I can't just uproot everything because you decided to reclaim what you think is yours. What I think is mine. Something dangerous flickered in Sung-ho's eyes. They're my blood, Sade. My legacy. They're children. Her voice sharpened. Not pawns. Not heirs. Not bargaining chips. They're 3 small humans who have never known violence, never been surrounded by bodyguards, never wondered if their father's enemies might target them for leverage. And you think I'd allow anyone to threaten them? I think you couldn't stop it. She pulled her hand away. Your father was the most powerful man in Seoul's underworld, and he still couldn't prevent his own son's wife from being terrorized out of the country. What makes you think you'd do any better? The question hung between them like a blade. Sung-ho's jaw tightened. My father was weak, he said finally. Concerned with image, tradition, the old ways of doing things. I am not. Then what are you? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, rawer, stripped of its usual control. Lonely. The admission caught her off guard. For 5 years, I have been surrounded by people who fear me, respect me, obey me without question. I have built an empire that spans 3 continents. I have more power than my father ever dreamed of. And none of it, has filled the space you left behind. Sade's breath caught. You destroyed me when you left, he continued. Not because you took away my pride or my plans for our future. Because you took away the only person who ever saw me as something other than a weapon. Sung-ho. I don't want to uproot your life, Sade. I don't want to drag you back into a world you barely survived the first time. But I can't. He swallowed hard. I can't walk away knowing they exist. Knowing you exist. Knowing that somewhere in this city, 3 children who carry my face are growing up without any knowledge of who their father is. They know. He looked at her sharply. They know about you, Sade clarified. Not everything, they're too young. But they know their father is Korean. They know his family has roots in Nigeria. They know he's complicated. Complicated. I was trying to prepare them for the possibility of meeting you someday. When they were old enough. When it was safe. When would it ever be safe enough for you? She didn't have an answer. The waiter brought their untouched drinks. Neither of them moved. Let me meet them, Sung-ho said quietly. Properly. Not as a stranger in a hotel lobby. As their father. And then what? I don't know. We figure it out together. One step at a time. Together. The word felt foreign. Impossible. They're at my neighbor's apartment, Sade heard herself say. Maman Gozi. She's watching them tonight. Tonight. If you're serious about meeting them, really meeting them, then do it now. Before I lose my nerve. Before I have time to convince myself this is a terrible idea. Sung-ho studied her face. It probably is a terrible idea. Probably. I don't care. He stood, offering his hand. Take me to my children. Introductions. Maman Gozi's apartment was small, warm, and filled with the sounds of children's laughter. Sade climbed the stairs with Sung-ho silent behind her, acutely aware of his presence in this space that had never known anything about her former life. Before we go in, she said, stopping on the landing. There are rules. Rules. You don't tell them who you are. Not yet. Tonight, you're my friend. Someone I knew from before. We'll figure out the rest later, once I've had time to prepare them. Sung-ho's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. They don't know I'm coming. No. Then how will you explain? The door opened. Maman Gozi stood in the doorway, her sharp eyes immediately assessing the tall stranger behind Sade. So this is him. Mama. Don't mama me, child. I may be old, but I'm not blind. This man has the same face as your Kento. The same eyes as your Amora. The same stubborn jaw as all three of them. She stepped aside, waving them in. I knew you'd bring him eventually. The children are in the living room. Sade's protest died on her lips. The apartment's living room was a cheerful chaos of toys, books, and crayons. Adora looked up first, her analytical gaze sharpening when she saw the stranger. Mama, who's that? This is. Sade glanced at Sung-ho. This is Mr. Choi. He's an old friend of mine from Korea. Kento rose slowly, positioning himself between his sisters and the newcomer. That protective instinct again, so achingly familiar. You're the man from the hotel, Kento said. The one who made Mama cry. Sung-ho flinched. I didn't mean to make her cry, he said carefully, crouching to Kento's level. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings about seeing people from their past. Your mother and I knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. Kento considered this. Did you hurt her? Kento, Sade began. Yes, Sung-ho said quietly. Not the way you're thinking. But I made choices that caused her pain, and for that, I'm very sorry. The honesty seemed to satisfy the little boy. He relaxed slightly, though he didn't move from his protective position. Amora, characteristically, had no such reservations. She bounded off the couch and marched straight up to Sung-ho, examining him with unabashed curiosity. You have drawings on your hand, she announced, pointing to his tattooed knuckles. Mama has drawings too. On her back. She says they're for remembering. Sung-ho went very still. Your mother has tattoos. Sade flushed. I got them after I left. To remember where I came from. Their eyes met over Amora's head. Something unspoken passed between them, surprise, curiosity, a recognition that they'd both been changed by the years apart. Can I see your drawings up close? Amora demanded. Sung-ho offered his hand. The little girl examined his tattoos with scientific intensity, tracing the patterns with one small finger. This one looks like a flower, she said. And this one looks like a house. And this one. She paused on a symbol near his wrist. This one looks like Mama's. It is like your mother's, Sung-ho said softly. It's a symbol that means strength in community. Where I come from, it represents family connections that can never be broken. Amora looked up at him with sudden seriousness. Do you have family? The question hung in the air like a held breath. I'm starting to realize, Sung-ho said carefully, that I have more family than I ever knew. The weight of secrets. The visit lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of careful conversation. 2 hours of watching Sung-ho interact with children who didn't know he was their father. 2 hours of seeing him teach Adora a Korean card game, help Kento build a block tower, and pretend to be defeated in a pillow fight with Amora. It was beautiful. It was agonizing. When the children finally fell asleep, exhausted from the excitement of a new friend, Sade walked Sung-ho to the building's entrance. They're remarkable, he said quietly. They are. Adora has your intelligence. Kento has your protective instincts. And Amora is exactly like you were at that age, according to your mother. Sade smiled sadly. She sent me photos once. Before she died. Your childhood photos. I wanted the children to know their grandmother, even if they couldn't know her in person. Sung-ho's expression shifted. My mother sent you photographs. She found me about a year after I left. I don't know how, she always was resourceful. She visited 3 times before she passed. Met the children. Held them. Told them stories about Korea. I didn't know. She wanted to tell you. But your father? Sade shook her head. He had eyes everywhere. If she'd revealed my location to you, he would have known. And she was terrified of what he might do. My father is dead, Sung-ho said harshly. Whatever hold he had over our lives is not entirely gone. Sade looked away. His lieutenants are still active. His networks still exist. Some of them never forgave you for taking control after his death. You know about that. I know about everything. She met his eyes. I've been watching you for years, Sung-ho. Just like you've apparently been watching me. The admission caught him off guard. You had surveillance on me. Nothing so sophisticated. News reports. Business journals. The occasional photograph from social events. She smiled grimly. I needed to know if you were becoming your father. I needed to know if you were safe, or if you become something my children could never survive. And what did you conclude? Sade was quiet for a long moment. I concluded that you're dangerous. Powerful. Sometimes ruthless in ways that frighten me. She reached up, touching his face before she could stop herself. But you're not him. You never were. Sung-ho caught her hand. Held it against his cheek. Come back to me, he said quietly. You and the children. I can protect you now. I can give you everything. I don't want everything. Sade pulled her hand away. I want safety. Stability. A normal life for my children. Our children. Our children, she agreed. Who have never known anything but peace. Think about what you're asking, Sung-ho. Really think about it. You want to pull them into your world, a world of bodyguards and safe rooms and constant vigilance. You want to take away the only childhood they've ever known. I want them to know their father. They can know you without living inside your empire. We can? I don't know. Share custody. Visits. Something that doesn't require me to upend everything I've built. Sung-ho's jaw tightened. You want me to be a part-time father? A visitor in my own children's lives. I want to be practical. You want to control the situation. Just like you controlled it 5 years ago when you decided, without consulting me, that I wasn't fit to be a parent. Sade flinched. That's not fair. Neither is discovering that my wife let me believe she was dead while she raised my children in secret. His voice was rising now. Neither is standing here, begging for scraps of access to my own flesh and blood. Neither is. Keep your voice down. Sade's tone turned sharp. The children are sleeping. Sung-ho stopped. Took a breath. Visibly forced himself back under control. I'm not going to fight with you about this tonight, he said finally. But understand me, Sade, I'm not leaving Lagos without some kind of arrangement. Some acknowledgement of my role in their lives. And if I refuse, then we'll have a much less pleasant conversation with lawyers present. He stepped closer. I don't want that. I want us to work together. But I won't be shut out. Not again. Not now that I know the truth. He touched her face, gentle, careful, nothing like the ruthless man she'd fled 5 years ago. I'm not my father, he said softly. I could never hurt you. I could never hurt them. Surely you know that by now. I don't know anything anymore. Then let me show you. Let me prove that I can be the man you need. The father they deserve. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Let me earn back the trust my family destroyed. Sade closed her eyes. This is a terrible idea, she thought. But when she opened her eyes, she heard herself say, breakfast. Tomorrow. At my bakery. We'll talk about next steps. Sung-ho's expression shifted. Softened. Thank you. He pressed his lips to her forehead, brief, reverent, achingly familiar, and then he was gone. Sade stood in the doorway for a long time after, watching the lights of his departing car disappear into the Lagos night. New mornings. The next morning arrived wrapped in uncertainty. Sade woke before dawn, unable to sleep, and found herself in her bakery kitchen long before the first hint of light touched the sky. The familiar rhythm of measuring and mixing soothed her nerves: flour, water, salt, yeast. Simple ingredients. Controllable outcomes. Unlike everything else in her life. The children arrived at 7, brought by Maman Ngozi, who shot Sade a meaningful look but said nothing. They were still buzzing with excitement about their new friend. Is Mr. Choi coming back today? Amora demanded. He promised to teach me more Korean words. He might stop by later, Sade said carefully. We'll see. I liked him, Adora announced. He listens properly. Not like most grown-ups. Even Kento, her cautious one, seemed reluctantly impressed. He knew how to build a really strong tower. And he didn't laugh when I told him I want to be an architect. Mr. Choi doesn't laugh very much at all, Amora observed. His face is like... She made a stern expression that was so accurate it would have been funny under other circumstances. The shop opened at 8. Regular customers trickled in for their morning bread and pastries. Sade moved through the familiar motions while her mind circled the same impossible questions. How do we make this work? How do I protect the children without denying them their father? How do I protect myself from falling back into his orbit? She was arranging a display of honey cakes when the bell chimed. Sung-ho stood in the doorway. But he wasn't alone. A beautiful Korean woman accompanied him, tall, elegant, dressed in designer silk that probably cost more than Sade's monthly rent. She surveyed the small bakery with barely concealed disdain, her crimson lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. So this is the famous shop, the woman said. Charming. In a provincial sort of way. Sade's spine straightened. Can I help you? Allow me to introduce my colleague, Sung-ho said. His expression was carefully blank, but there was tension in his shoulders that Sade recognized. This is Yoon Ha-rene. She's been assisting with my company's African expansion. Assistant seems like such a limited word. Ha-rene moved closer, examining Sade like a specimen under glass. I prefer to think of myself as Mr. Choi's partner. The implication was clear. Sade kept her expression neutral. How lovely for you. Is there something I can help you with, or did you just come to critique my decor? Ha-rene's eyes narrowed. I came to see what all the fuss was about. Sung-ho has been so distracted since arriving in Lagos. Cancelling meetings. Disappearing for hours at a time. Her gaze flickered to the back of the shop, where children's laughter could be heard. Now I understand why. Harene. Sung-ho's voice carried a warning. That's enough. Is it? The woman turned to him, her mask slipping slightly. You've barely spoken to me since you saw this woman in the lobby. You've rearranged your entire schedule around her. And now I find out there are children involved. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. How long were you planning to keep this particular secret? This is not the place for this conversation. No, the place for this conversation was 3 years ago, when you first started searching for your runaway wife. But you never mentioned that little detail, did you? Never thought I might want to know that you were still obsessed with someone who abandoned you. Sade watched this exchange with growing unease. I think you should leave, she said quietly. Both of you. This is my place of business, not a venue for personal drama. Harene turned on her with venom in her eyes. Your place of business? She laughed. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I could destroy this pathetic shop with a single phone call. I could make sure you never. Enough. Sung-ho moved between them, his tattooed hand closing around Harene's arm with enough force to make her wince. You will apologize to Mrs. Choi. You will leave this shop. And you will never speak to her, or her children, again. Is that understood? Harene's face contorted with humiliation and rage. You're choosing her? Some nobody from Lagos who couldn't even. I said enough. The words were quiet. Final. Terrifying. Harene went pale. Whatever she saw in Sung-ho's expression made her swallow her next words. Fine, she said tightly. Have your little reunion. But don't expect me to be waiting when you come to your senses. She stormed out. The bell chimed violently in her wake. Sade let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I'm sorry, Sung-ho said stiffly. I didn't know she was going to follow me. She saw me leaving the hotel, Anne. Is she your girlfriend? The question came out before Sade could stop it. Sung-ho was quiet for a moment. She would like to be. We've been together. Occasionally. But I've never given her any commitment or promise of a future. Because you were still looking for me. Because I never stopped loving you. The admission hung in the air between them. Sade turned away, busying herself with unnecessary rearranging. The children are in the back, she said. Coloring. If you want to see them. Sade. Not now. Her voice cracked. I can't, not now. Just go see your children. We'll talk later. She felt him watching her for a long moment. Then he moved past her, toward the back room, toward the 3 small humans who held both their futures in their tiny hands. The watching shadow. The days that followed took on a strange new rhythm. Sung-ho arrived at the bakery every morning. He helped Kento with his reading. He let Amora paint his fingernails with washable markers. He sat quietly beside Adora while she explained the architectural principles she'd learned from picture books. He was patient. Gentle. Present in a way that made Sade's chest ache. And slowly, carefully, the children began to trust him. Mr. Choi knows everything about building, Kento reported one evening. He said when I'm older, he'll show me real blueprints. Mr. Choi taught me 7 new Korean words today, Amora announced. And he said my accent is getting better. Mr. Choi helped me understand my math homework, Adora added quietly. He explained it different than the teacher, and now it makes sense. Sade listened to these reports with a mixture of gratitude and terror. They're falling in love with him, she realized. And I have no idea how to protect them from the inevitable heartbreak when his world catches up with us. That heartbreak came sooner than expected. It was the 8th day of Sung-ho's visits when Sade noticed the car. A black sedan, parked across the street from her bakery. The windows were tinted dark, impossible to see through. It had been there since morning, and its occupants hadn't moved. Problem? Sung-ho asked, following her gaze. That car. It's been there all day. His expression shifted, sharpened, into something she recognized from their years together. The predator emerging beneath the careful civilian mask. Take the children upstairs, he said quietly. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you. Sung-ho. Now, Sade. She didn't argue. The children were confused but compliant, following their mother up the back stairs to the small apartment above the bakery. Sade locked every bolt, pulled the curtains, and settled the triplets on the couch with a movie they'd seen 100 times. Then she watched from a crack in the curtain as Sung-ho walked toward the black sedan. 2 men emerged as he approached. Sade's heart stopped. She recognized them. Park Jin-woo, the man who'd visited her bakery weeks ago. And another man, older, scarred, with the look of someone who'd seen and caused considerable violence. Words were exchanged. She couldn't hear them, but she could read Sung-ho's body language. Tense. Controlled. Furious. Then Jin-woo handed him something. A photograph. Even from this distance, Sade could see Sung-ho's face transform. The careful control shattered. Something raw and dangerous emerged, something she'd never seen before in all their years together. He crumpled the photograph in his fist. Said something low and lethal. Jin-woo stepped back, from whatever he saw in Sung-ho's eyes. Then both men got back in the sedan and drove away. Sung-ho stood in the street for a long moment, his shoulders rigid, his tattooed hand still clenched into fists. When he finally turned back toward the bakery, Sade glimpsed his expression. Pure, undiluted terror. Not anger. Not fury. Fear. She'd never seen Choi Sung-ho afraid of anything. Until now. The threat. Sung-ho came through the bakery door like a storm given human form. Pack a bag, he said. Essentials only. We're leaving in 15 minutes. What? Sung-ho, what happened? What? He pressed the crumpled photograph into her hands. Sade smoothed it out. Her blood turned to ice. The photograph showed Kento, Amora, and Adaora leaving Mamangozi's building 2 days ago. Someone had circled each of their faces in red marker. Beneath the image, a single typed line. The sins of the father will be visited upon the children. Who sent this? Her voice didn't sound like her own. Someone who wants to hurt me. Someone who knows that hurting them, his voice cracked, would destroy me more completely than any attack on my life ever could. But how did they find RNA? The name came out like poison. She was angry. Humiliated. She has connections to factions that have opposed my leadership for years. She must have, he broke off, visibly fighting for control. It doesn't matter how. What matters is getting you and the children somewhere safe. Now. Sade's maternal instincts screamed to compliance. But her mind, the part that had survived 5 years of hiding, rebelled. Running didn't work last time, she said quietly. Your father found me. These people will too. Then what do you suggest? Sung-ho's voice was raw. Wait here and hope they're bluffing? Let them. No. She gripped his arms, forcing him to meet her eyes. No more running. No more hiding. We end this. Together. Sade. You wanted me to trust you. To believe you could protect our children. She squared her shoulders. Prove it. Show me that the man I married is capable of eliminating this threat, all of it, without uprooting the lives we've built. Sung-ho stared at her. That would mean bringing you into my world. The parts I've been trying to shield you from. I was in your world for 3 years. I know what it looks like. She lifted her chin. I'm not the naive girl you married. I'm a mother now. And mothers do whatever is necessary to protect their children. Something shifted in his expression. Pride. Respect. And something deeper, something that looked almost like hope. You would fight beside me. I would walk through hell beside you if it meant keeping them safe. He was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, pressing his lips to the top of her head. I've waited 5 years to hear you say those words. Don't make me regret them. Never. He pulled back, all business now. We'll need to move carefully. I have resources in Lagos, people I trust. But this threat traces back to Seoul. To the heart of my operation. Then we go to Seoul. Sade. The children come with us. We make them visible. Let whoever's threatening us see that we're not afraid. That we're united. That attacking our family means facing both of us. Sung-ho studied her face. You've changed, he said softly. I had to. No. He cupped her face in his tattooed hands. You didn't change. You became the woman I always knew you could be. Sade's eyes stung. Is this really happening? Are we really doing this? If you're willing. She thought of her children upstairs. Their innocent laughter. Their fearless spirits. The way they'd already come to love a father they didn't know they had. She thought of the photograph in her hand. The red circles around their faces. The sins of the father will be visited upon the children. Not while she was breathing. Make the call, she said. We leave for Seoul tomorrow. The revelation. That night, after the children were asleep, Sade made a decision. We have to tell them, she said quietly. Before we leave. Before they're thrown into your world without understanding why. Sung-ho sat across from her at the small kitchen table, his jacket removed, his sleeves rolled to reveal the intricate tattoos that climbed his forearms. In the dim lamplight, he looked almost soft. Almost safe. Almost like the man she'd fallen in love with nearly a decade ago. Are you sure? He asked. Once they know, there's no going back. They deserve the truth. They deserve to understand what's happening and why. He nodded slowly. How do you want to do this? Together. In the morning. Before we pack. And if they're angry? If they feel lied to, betrayed? Then we deal with it. Together. She reached across the table, taking his hand. That's what parents do. His fingers tightened around hers. I don't know how to be a father, he admitted quietly. I had no model for it. Mine was a monster. I have no idea if I'm capable of. You've been learning every day for the past week. You're patient with them. You listen. You make them feel seen. She smiled sadly. Those are things my father never did. And he wasn't a monster, just absent. Distracted. Too busy with his own life to notice mine. I'll never be absent, Sung-ho said fiercely. I'll never be distracted. I've already missed 5 years. I won't miss another moment. Then help me tell them. Tomorrow morning. And whatever happens after, we face it as a family. The word hung between them. Family. Something Sade had been building alone for 5 years. Something Sung-ho had been mourning for even longer. Maybe, just maybe, something they could rebuild together. The following morning. The children sat in a row on the living room couch, sensing something significant in the air. Kento was watchful. Adora was analytical. Amora was trying to climb the curtains until Sade gently redirected her. Mama, why is Mr. Choi here so early? Amora asked. Are we going on an adventure? Something like that. Sade sat on the coffee table facing them, with Sung-ho beside her. But first, there's something important we need to tell you. Something about who Mr. Choi really is. The children exchanged glances. We know who he is, Kento said quietly. We figured it out. Sade froze. You what? We're not stupid, Mama. Adeora's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. He has the same eyes as us. The same ears. Amora has his exact smile, we've seen it in pictures. What pictures? The ones grandmother sent. Before she died. Kento met Sungho's eyes steadily. She told us stories about her son. About how he was brave and strong and how someday we might get to meet him. Sungho's throat worked visibly. You knew, he said hoarsely. This whole time. We weren't sure, Amara interrupted. But you feel right. Like home. She scrambled off the couch and threw her arms around his legs. You're our appa, aren't you? Our real appa? The Korean word, father, coming from her small voice broke something in him. Sade watched tears stream down Sungho's face as he gathered Amora into his arms. Watched Kento and Adora approach more cautiously, but approach nonetheless. Watched her children embrace the father they'd been waiting for all along. I'm sorry, Sungho managed. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Kento said seriously. Just don't leave again. Never. Sungho pressed his forehead to his son's. I will never leave you. Any of you. For as long as I live. Sade couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but watch her family, their family, finally become whole. Departure. The private jet waited at Lagos's Murtala Muhammad International Airport, gleaming in the afternoon sun like a promise of everything Sade had once fled from. The children were vibrating with excitement, having never been on a plane before, let alone a private one. Sungho's security team had swept the aircraft twice. His assistant, a nervous young man named Park Sung-jae, waited at the base of the stairs with tablets preloaded with children's movies and noise-cancelling headphones sized for small ears. This is too much, Sade murmured as they approached. This is safety, Sungho replied. For the next 14 hours, nothing can touch us. She wanted to argue. Old habits demanded independence, self-reliance, control over her own circumstances. But she was so tired of carrying everything alone. The flight departed at sunset. Lagos disappeared beneath clouds painted gold and rose, and the children pressed their faces to windows, gasping at the beauty of the world from above. Mama, look! Amora pointed at a distant mountain peak. It looks like a sleeping giant. That's Mount Cameroon, Adora said knowledgeably. It's a volcano. We learned about it in school. Everything looks so small from up here, Kento observed quietly. Like nothing is as big as it seems. Sungho caught Sade's eye across the cabin. Like nothing is as big as it seems. Maybe their problems weren't either. Maybe, with enough courage, enough unity, enough love, they could overcome anything. The children fell asleep somewhere over the Mediterranean, curled together like puppies in the jet's comfortable beds. Sade tucked blankets around them, pressed kisses to foreheads, whispered promises she hoped she could keep. When she returned to the main cabin, Sungho was waiting. We need to talk about what happens when we land. I know. Seoul isn't like Lagos. My enemies are more concentrated there. More dangerous. I know. If anything happens to you, to the children. Stop. She sat across from him. I chose this. We chose this. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, he repeated, like a vow. Silence stretched between them. I never stopped loving you, she said quietly. Even when I hated you. Even when I convinced myself you were better off without me. Even when I was so angry I couldn't breathe. I know. How? He pulled a small object from his pocket. Her wedding ring. The one she'd left on his nightstand the morning she disappeared. I've carried this every day for 5 years, he said. In my pocket. Against my heart. A reminder of what I lost and what I would someday find again. Sade's vision blurred. You kept it. I kept everything. He moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. Every letter my father intercepted. Every photograph. Every piece of evidence that proved you loved me, even when the rest of the world said you didn't. Sung-ho. I should have fought harder. Should have questioned my father's version of events. Should have trusted what I knew about you instead of believing his lies. You didn't know. I should have known. His voice cracked. You were my wife. My heart. My everything. And I let you go because I was too broken to believe I deserved your love. Sade cupped his face in her hands. We both made mistakes, she whispered. We both believed lies. We both ran from the truth instead of facing it. And now? Now we face everything. Together. As a family. She kissed him. It was their first real kiss in 5 years, soft at first, tentative, relearning shapes and textures they'd once known by heart. Then deeper. More desperate. Years of longing and loss and love pouring between them like water finding its level. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. There's something else, Sade said quietly. What? She stood, turning her back to him. Slowly, carefully, she unbuttoned her blouse enough to reveal her upper back. Sung-ho's breath caught. Tattooed across her shoulder blade, in elegant Korean script intertwined with Adinkra symbols. My heart belongs only to you. I got it 2 years after leaving, she whispered. A reminder. A promise to myself. That even if I never saw you again, even if we lived separate lives forever, my heart would never belong to anyone else. Sung-ho rose. Crossed the space between them. Pressed his lips to the tattooed words on her skin. I have a matching one, he murmured against her shoulder. Over my heart. Same words. Same languages. I got it the day I found my father's files and realized you'd never betrayed me at all. Sade turned in his arms. Their eyes met. We've been carrying each other all along, she said. We have. Then maybe we were never really apart. Never. He pressed his forehead to hers. Not in any way that matters. The jet hummed through the darkness, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in 5 years, they faced that uncertainty together. And that made all the difference. Seoul. Incheon International Airport gleamed like a temple of glass and steel. The children emerged from the jet with wide eyes, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything. Korean announcements echoed through the terminal. Sleek trains whisked passengers to distant gates. Everything moved with a precision that felt almost choreographed. Is this where you grew up, Appa? Amora asked, gripping Sung-ho's hand. Not here exactly, he said. But in this city. Yes. It's very clean, Adora observed. And big, Kento added quietly. Sade watched her children absorb this new world, this half of their heritage they'd only known through stories and photographs. She tried to teach them about Korea, language lessons, cultural traditions, their grandmother's recipes, but nothing could substitute for the real thing. A convoy of black vehicles waited outside the private terminal. The main compound is 40 minutes from here, Sung-ho explained as they climbed into an armored SUV. You'll have separate quarters, private, secure, connected to the main house but with your own entrance. The children's rooms are already prepared. You were confident we'd come. Hopeful. He met her eyes. I've spent 3 years preparing that house for you. Just in case. Sade didn't know what to say to that. The convoy moved through Seoul streets, and she watched the city transform around them. Modern skyscrapers gave way to traditional Hanok neighborhoods. Neon lights faded into lantern-lit temples. Everything felt like a collision of worlds, ancient and contemporary, Korean and global, familiar and utterly foreign. Finally, they turned onto a gated road that wound uphill through carefully manicured gardens. The Choi compound emerged from the greenery like something from another century. Traditional Korean architecture blended with modern security features, cameras hidden in pagoda eaves, guards disguised as gardeners, motion sensors embedded in decorative stone pathways. The main house sprawled across the hillside, connected by covered walkways to smaller buildings that served various purposes. "This is where you live," Amora breathed. "This is where we live," Sung-ho corrected gently. "Now." The children tumbled out of the car, immediately distracted by a koi pond near the entrance. Sade stood back, watching them explore, trying to quiet the alarm bells ringing in her chest. This is his world. His territory. His rules. But it was also their children's heritage. And maybe, just maybe, it could become her home again too. The gathering storm. The first 3 days in Seoul passed in a blur of settling in. The children's quarters were exactly as Sung-ho described, private, secure, decorated with warm colors and soft textures that made the space feel like home rather than a fortress. Each child had their own room, connected by a shared playroom stocked with books, art supplies, and educational toys. Sade's room adjoined theirs, accessible through a hidden door concealed behind a bookshelf. In case of emergency, Sung-ho explained, you can get to them in seconds without anyone knowing your location. You've thought of everything. I've had 3 years to think. His expression was haunted. 3 years of imagining every possible threat and how to counter it. Sade understood. She'd done the same thing in Lagos, planning escape routes, memorizing safe houses, preparing go bags that the children thought were just for adventures. Different methods. Same fear. On the 4th day, the threat materialized. Sade was in the compound's garden, watching the children play, when Sung-ho emerged from the main house with a face like gathering thunder. We have a problem. What kind? The kind that requires immediate action. He guided her away from the children, lowering his voice. HRNA has formally allied with my father's former lieutenants. They're calling themselves the True Blood Faction, old guard who believe the Choi Empire should have passed to blood relatives rather than an adopted son. Adopted? Sung-ho's jaw tightened. My father adopted me when I was 3. My birth parents were associates of his, killed in a raid when I was an infant. He raised me as his son, trained me as his heir, but there were always whispers that the bloodline wasn't pure. Sade stared at him. You never told me. It wasn't relevant. I am his son in every way that matters. But these factions. He exhaled sharply. They use any excuse to challenge my authority. My adoption. My African heritage. My children's African heritage. Our children are targets because they're mixed. Our children are targets because they're mine. The specific reasons are irrelevant, any weakness will be exploited. Sade's hands curled into fists. What do? We do what I've been planning for 3 years. Sung-ho's expression hardened. We cut out the cancer before it spreads. That evening, the War Council met in Sung-ho's study, a room Sade had never been permitted to enter during their marriage. She entered now with her chin high and her spine straight. A dozen people occupied the space, security chiefs, intelligence operatives, and 2 fierce-looking women Sade didn't recognize but immediately respected. One was Korean, middle-aged, with silver streaks in her black hair and the calm eyes of someone who had survived horrors beyond imagination. The other was Nigerian, younger, with traditional scarification marks on her cheeks and the muscular build of a warrior. Sade, this is Madame Kwon, my father's former advisor, now mine, and Captain Adiz Okonkwo of my Lagos operations. Both women inclined their heads. Mrs. Choi, Madame Kwon said. We've heard a great deal about you. All of it good, I hope. All of it relevant. The older woman smiled slightly. Your husband credits you with a tactical mind. We shall see if that's accurate. Sade took a seat at the table, refusing to be intimidated. Tell me about the threat. The briefing lasted 2 hours. She learned the names and faces of every faction leader. Studied maps of their territories, hierarchies of their power structures, histories of their grudges. She learned that RNA was the figurehead but not the brains, that honor belonged to a man named Choi Jae-minute, a distant cousin who believed the empire should have been his by right. Jae-minute has been building alliances for years, Captain Adiz explained. Waiting for the right moment to strike. Your arrival with the children gave him that moment. Why? Because it exposed Sung-ho's vulnerability. Madame Kwon's voice was gentle but firm. For 5 years, he was untouchable, nothing to lose, no one to protect, no weaknesses to exploit. Now he has 3 beautiful reasons to hesitate. And his enemies know it. Sade turned to Sung-ho. Is that true? Are we making you vulnerable? You're making me stronger, he said quietly. I spent 5 years operating from a place of emptiness. Ruthless because I had nothing to live for. Dangerous because I didn't care if I died. His eyes held hers. Now I have everything to live for. That's not weakness, it's motivation. Pretty words, Jae-minute's voice crackled from a speaker in the corner. Everyone in the room went still. Did you think we wouldn't find your frequencies? The voice was cultured, amused, terrifyingly close. Did you think your defenses were impenetrable? Sung-ho's face transformed into something cold and deadly. Jae-minute. I wondered when you'd stop hiding behind proxies. I'm not hiding, cousin. I'm watching. The voice took on a sharper edge. Your beautiful wife. Your adorable children. Such a lovely family. It would be a shame if anything happened to them. Sade's blood ran cold. Touch them and I will end you. Ah, there it is. The famous Choi temper. Jae-minute laughed. I don't need to touch them, Sung-ho. I just need you to know that I can. Any time I choose. Any place you think is safe. A pause. Sleep well, cousin. Or don't. It makes no difference to me. The speaker went dead. Silence filled the room like a held breath. Find him, Sung-ho said quietly. Find him and bring him to me. Sir. Now. People scattered to obey. Sade remained seated, her mind racing. He's trying to destabilize you, she said finally. Make you angry. Force you into mistakes. I know. Then don't give him what he wants. She rose, crossing to stand before him. We're not just your weakness, Sung-ho. We're your strength. Use us. Use you? Sade, I won't risk. You're not risking us. We're volunteering. She gripped his arms. Let the children be seen. Let the world know they exist and that they're protected by both of us. Don't hide them like shameful secrets, present them like the heirs they are. That would put an even bigger target on their backs. It would also show your enemies that you're not afraid. That we're united. That attacking us means facing the full force of your power. She lifted her chin. That's how we survived in Lagos for 5 years. By being visible, established, part of the community. Nobody attacks what belongs to everyone. Sung-ho studied her face. You want to go public. I want to fight. Not from the shadows. Not with hiding and running and hoping they don't find us. I want to stand beside you and show the world what we're made of. The silence stretched. Then Sung-ho smiled, the first real smile she'd seen since arriving in Seoul. My wife, he said softly. My warrior. My equal. Your partner, she corrected. In everything. He kissed her forehead. Then we fight together. And may God have mercy on anyone who tries to hurt our family. End of batch 1. He had searched for her across continents and years. She had hidden their children to protect them from his world. But fate had other plans. Now, united against enemies who would destroy everything they love, Sade and Sung-ho must learn to fight together, as partners, as parents, as something that might just be love reborn from the ashes of betrayal. But the threat is closer than they know. The enemy wears a familiar face. And the price of victory may be higher than either of them can imagine. The public declaration. 3 days later, Seoul. The Grand Hyatt Seoul glittered like a crown jewel against the night sky. Black luxury vehicles lined the curved driveway, discharging Korea's elite in waves of silk, diamonds, and barely concealed ambition. The annual Choi Foundation Gala was the most exclusive event on Seoul's social calendar. An invitation signified power, its absence signified irrelevance. Tonight, Choi Sung-ho would make a declaration that would reshape everything. Sade stood before the mirror in her private quarters, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The stylist Sung-ho had hired, a quiet genius named Minute G, had transformed her into something between African queen and Korean royalty. Her gown was custom-made, deep burgundy silk with traditional Korean embroidery along the bodice, transitioning into flowing Ankara-inspired patterns at the hem. Her natural hair was styled in an elaborate updo woven with gold thread and small diamonds. The effect was breathtaking, a visual statement of her dual heritage. "Mama, you look like a princess." Amora burst through the door, followed by her siblings. All 3 children wore matching formal wear, the girls in miniature versions of traditional hanbok with African print sashes, Kento in a tailored suit with a pocket square bearing both Korean and Nigerian patterns. "You all look beautiful," Sade said, kneeling to adjust Adeora's collar. "Remember what we discussed. Stay together," Kento recited. "Stay near the security team. Don't talk to strangers without permission. And if anyone asks who our father is, we tell the truth," Amora said proudly. Choi Sung-ho. The most powerful man in Korea. Sade's heart clenched. The most dangerous man in Korea, she thought. And we're about to paint targets on all our backs. But there was no turning back now. A knock at the door announced Sung-ho's arrival. He entered wearing a black tuxedo that fit him like armor, the tattoo on his neck just visible above his collar. His cufflinks bore the Choi family crest, a tiger intertwined with an eagle, symbolizing Korean strength and Nigerian vision. His father had designed it decades ago, never imagining how literally it would one day apply. Sung-ho stopped short when he saw Sade. For a long moment, he simply stared. "You." He swallowed. "You're exquisite. Clean up pretty well for a baker. You've always been the most beautiful woman I've ever known. Tonight, you're simply letting the rest of the world see it." Heat crept up Sade's neck. The children, sensing the charged atmosphere, exchanged knowing glances. Amora made exaggerated kissing noises until Kento elbowed her into silence. "Shall we?" Sung-ho offered his arm. Sade took it. Into battle, she thought. Together. The entrance. The ballroom fell silent when they appeared at the top of the grand staircase. 500 of Korea's most powerful people turned as one, conversations dying mid-sentence, champagne glasses freezing halfway to lips. The orchestra stumbled over a note before recovering. Sade felt every eye like a physical weight. Sung-ho's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, steady, warm, anchoring. "Smile," he murmured. "You're not their prey. You're their queen." She lifted her chin and smiled. They descended together, the children following in a perfect line coached by Captain Adiz. Kento walked with his shoulders squared, a miniature version of his father's contained power. Adora moved with quiet grace, observing everything with analytical intensity. And Amora, irrepressible Amora, waved at random guests like she was already their favorite person. Whispers erupted like brushfire. His wife? She's supposed to be dead. Those children, look at their faces. Mixed blood in the Choi line? The old guard will never accept. She's Nigerian? But she's beautiful. 3 of them? Triplets? How did he hide this for? Sung-ho guided them toward the center of the room, where a raised platform held the evening's speaking podium. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow, not from respect alone, but from instinctive recognition of apex predator energy. He helped Sade onto the platform, then lifted each child up beside her. His movements were deliberate, public, impossible to misinterpret. This is my family, every gesture proclaimed. Challenge them at your peril. An event coordinator hurried forward with a microphone, clearly thrown off script but too well trained to show it. Sung-ho took the device without acknowledging her. Distinguished guests, he began, his voice carrying easily across the massive space. I've brought you here tonight under the pretense of our annual charitable gathering. The Choi Foundation will continue its important work, that much remains unchanged. He paused, letting silence build. But I have a personal announcement that cannot wait any longer. The crowd held its collective breath. Many of you knew my wife, Sade Adebayo Choi. Some of you believed she died 5 years ago. Others assumed she abandoned our marriage. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Neither is true. She was driven from my protection by forces within my own organization, forces I have since eliminated. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tonight, I present her publicly as what she has always been, the love of my life, the mother of my children, and the future matriarch of the Choi Empire. He turned to face Sade directly. In 3 days, we will renew our vows in a ceremony that will leave no doubt about her position. Anyone who threatens her, disrespects her, or questions her legitimacy will answer directly to me. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Sung-ho did something that shocked even Sade. He knelt. Right there, on the platform, before 500 witnesses, the most powerful man in Korea knelt at her feet. I failed you once, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I will never fail you again. Will you give me the chance to prove it? Sade's vision blurred with tears. This is real, she realized. This is actually happening. Yes, she whispered. Then, louder, yes. Sung-ho rose and kissed her, brief, reverent, devastating, while the crowd erupted in applause that was equal parts genuine approval and calculated self-preservation. No one wanted to be seen opposing the Choi family's reunification. No one except the enemies watching from the shadows. The predators circle. The gala continued around them like a glittering storm. Sade navigated the social minefield with grace she'd forgotten she possessed, accepting congratulations from people who'd probably celebrated her disappearance 5 years ago. The children were spirited away by Captain Adi's team after an hour, their presence established, their faces now known to everyone who mattered. You're handling this well, Madame Kwon observed, materializing at Sade's elbow. Better than expected. Should I be insulted by that? You should be proud. Most people crumble under this kind of scrutiny. The older woman's eye swept the room. 3 o'clock. The woman in blue. Sade followed her gaze casually. Rna stood near the champagne fountain, stunning in a sapphire gown that probably cost more than Sade's bakery earned in a year. She wasn't looking at Sade directly, too obvious, but her attention was unmistakably fixed. She's bold to show her face here, Sade murmured. She was invited before her alliance with Jaemin it became public knowledge. Sung-ho couldn't uninvite her without revealing how much we know. Madame Kwon's voice remained pleasant, her expression serene. She's here to observe. Perhaps to intimidate. Is it working? You tell me. Sade considered the question honestly. Fear? Yes. Anger? Absolutely. But overwhelming both was something she hadn't expected, clarity. Rna had allied herself with people who wanted to hurt her children. Everything else, jealousy, rivalry, personal history, became irrelevant in the face of that simple fact. No, Sade said quietly. It's not working. Good. Madame Kwon smiled. Because she's about to come speak to you. Rna glided across the ballroom with the inevitability of an approaching storm. Her smile was perfect, warm, welcoming, poisonous beneath the surface. Mrs. Choi. Or should I say, the returned Mrs. Choi. Rna air-kissed both her cheeks in the European style. What a surprise to see you here. We all thought you were dead. Disappointed. Concerned. Rna's smile sharpened. Disappearing for 5 years, hiding 3 children from their father, letting him believe you betrayed him, these aren't the actions of a loving wife. Neither is allying with factions that threaten his family. But here we are. Something flickered in Harene's eyes, surprise, perhaps, that Sade knew. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Sade maintained her pleasant expression. Just like you don't know that we've traced the threat against my children directly to Jaemin's network. Just like you don't know that Sung-ho has spent 3 years building contingencies for exactly this scenario. Just like you don't know that every person who's ever threatened his family has eventually disappeared. Harene's smile froze. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Sade stepped closer, lowering her voice. You wanted him. I understand that. He's extraordinary, and being wanted by someone like that is intoxicating. But he was never yours, Harene. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. And you think he's yours? I know he's mine. Sade held up her left hand, where a new ring glittered beside her wedding band. The engagement ring she'd left behind 5 years ago returned to its rightful place. The same way I know my children are safe, my position is secure, and anyone who tries to change that will regret it. Silence stretched between them. Then Harene laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. You have no idea what you've walked into, she hissed. This world, his world, it devours people like you. Soft people. Gentle people. People who think love can protect them from bullets and betrayal. You're right. I was soft once. Gentle. Naive. Sade's expression hardened. I'm not anymore. She turned and walked away, leaving Harene alone by the champagne fountain. Madame Kwon fell into step beside her. Impressive, the older woman said. Sung-ho chose well. I chose myself, Sade corrected. He just happened to be there when I did. The gathering darkness. Later that night, Choi compound. The children were asleep when Sade returned to their quarters, exhausted from the evening's excitement. She checked each room, Adora with a book fallen across her chest, Kento in precise stillness, Amora sprawled diagonally across her bed like she was trying to claim maximum territory even in sleep. Safe, she thought. For now. She found Sung-ho in his study, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, tattoos visible as he pored over reports spread across his desk. The room smelled of sandalwood and something sharper, stress, perhaps, or anticipation. Harene spoke to me tonight, Sade said, closing the door behind her. I saw. He didn't look up. You handled her well. I wanted to scratch her eyes out. Natural impulse. Less practical than what you actually did. He finally met her gaze. She's afraid of you, you know. More than she's afraid of me. Why? Because I'm predictable. Dangerous, but dangerous in ways she understands. He rose, circling the desk to stand before her. You're something new. Something she can't categorize or manipulate. A mother defending her children is the most terrifying force in nature. Sade laughed shakily. I don't feel terrifying. I feel exhausted. You should sleep. So should you. Soon. He touched her face, gentle, reverent. There's something I need to show you first. He led her through a door she'd never noticed, hidden behind a panel of books. Beyond lay a narrow corridor that descended beneath the compound, lit by motion-activated lights that flicked on as they passed. Where are we going? The heart of everything. The corridor ended at a massive steel door with biometric locks that required both retinal scan and fingerprint verification. Sung-ho entered his codes, then guided Sade's hand to the scanner. You're giving me access. You're my wife. My partner. Everything I have is yours. The door opened. Sade's breath caught. The room beyond was vast, a command center that rivaled anything she'd seen in movies. Screens covered every wall, displaying feeds from cameras across Seoul, Lagos, and a dozen other cities. Operators sat at workstations, monitoring information flows. Maps showed the real-time positions of Choi assets worldwide. This is how you found me, she realized. How you knew about the children. Eventually. It took longer than it should have. My father compartmentalized information, kept my searches separate from his surveillance. I didn't find the overlap until after his death. And now? Now nothing happens in our territories without my knowledge. He guided her deeper into the room, past the operators to a private office overlooking the command center, including J-Minute's movements. He pulled up a display on the office's main screen. Photographs. Locations. Communication intercepts. The entire architecture of the threat against their family laid out in clinical detail. He's in Busan, Sung-ho said. Operating from a shipping warehouse his grandfather used to own. He has 37 direct operatives, another 100 contracted mercenaries, and financial backing from 3 overseas interests who'd love to see me fall. That's a lot. It is. But I have more. His expression hardened. The question is whether to strike now, while he's consolidated, or wait for him to make a move that justifies public retaliation. What's the difference? Strike now, and I'm the aggressor. The other families see me as unstable, threatening, dangerous to challenge but also dangerous to ally with. Wait for his move, and I'm the defender. Righteous. Justified. The kind of leader people want to follow. But waiting puts us at risk. Yes. Sade studied the screens, her mind working through the implications. There's a third option, she said slowly. You make him think he has an opportunity. Bait him into striking in a way you control. Minimize the risk while maximizing the justification. Sung-ho went very still. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to end this. Permanently. In a way that doesn't leave our children looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Sade. You said I was your partner. Your equal. She turned to face him. Did you mean it, or was that just for the cameras? His jaw tightened. I meant every word. Then let me help you plan this. Let me be part of the solution instead of just another asset to protect. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, Sung-ho nodded. Show me what you're thinking. The trap. The following days. The plan took shape over 72 hours of intense coordination. Sade discovered a strategic mind within herself she'd never fully explored, honed by 5 years of evading detection, protecting her children, anticipating threats before they materialized. She worked alongside Madame Kwon and Captain Adiz, 3 women from different backgrounds united by a single purpose. The wedding renewal ceremony, Sade proposed. It's the perfect opportunity. Public, visible, impossible to hide. If J-Minute wants to strike at the heart of the family, he'll do it then. You want to use your own wedding as a trap. Captain Adiz raised an eyebrow. Bold. I want my wedding to be the last battleground. After this, no one questions our family's position. No one threatens our children. No one challenges Sung-ho's authority. And if it goes wrong, then we're no worse off than we would be waiting for J-Minute to choose his own moment. Sade's voice was steady. At least this way, we control the variables. Madame Kwon studied her with new respect. You've grown, child. From the frightened bride I watched flee 5 years ago into something quite formidable. I had to. My children's lives depended on it. And now their father's life depends on your strategy. The older woman smiled thinly. Let's make sure you're worthy of that responsibility. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The wedding ceremony would be held at the Choi compound, home territory, controlled environment, familiar ground. Invitations would go out to every major player in Korea's political and business worlds, including representatives of the old guard families who'd backed J-Minute. Declining would be a public insult, attending would place them inside Sung-ho's power base. Security would be visible but apparently not overwhelming, enough to suggest confidence, not enough to suggest paranoia. The real protection would be invisible, underground bunkers for the children, extraction routes masked as service corridors, enough armed response teams to repel a small army. He'll see the opportunity, Sung-ho agreed, reviewing the final plans. His agents will be among the guests or the staff. They'll report apparent vulnerabilities, which are actually traps, Sade added. Every weakness he thinks he's exploiting is something we want him to target. And when his people move, we let them get close enough to commit. Then we end it. Her voice was cold in a way that surprised even her. Permanently. Sung-ho looked at her for a long moment. You've changed. I've evolved. There's a difference. Is there? The old me couldn't have done this. Couldn't have planned violence, accepted its necessity, prepared to watch people die. She met his eyes. The old me was a victim. This version of me refuses to be. And after? When this is done and our enemies are neutralized, then I go back to being a mother and a wife. Someone who bakes bread and helps with homework and attends school plays. She stepped closer to him. But those people will exist inside a world you've made safe. Violence isn't who I am, it's what I'm willing to do for the people I love. Sung-ho pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She smiled against his chest. But you have me anyway. Now let's finish this. The vows. The wedding day. The Choi compound transformed into something from a dream. Traditional Korean pavilions draped in white silk and African Kent cloth lined the processional path. Lanterns hung from ancient trees, ready to glow when evening fell. An altar stood at the center of the main garden, decorated with flowers from both Nigeria and Korea, hibiscus beside mugwort, orchids beside birds of paradise. 400 guests had gathered, a carefully curated mix of allies, neutrals, and enemies who didn't know they'd been identified. They mingled among the decorations, sipping champagne, playing political games that had defined Korean society for centuries. None of them knew they were standing inside an elaborate trap. Sade prepared in her quarters with only Maman Gozi for company. The older woman had flown in from Lagos, refusing to miss this moment. You look beautiful, child, Maman Gozi said, adjusting Sade's veil. Terrified, but beautiful. I'm not terrified. You should be. You're marrying the same man twice, walking into a situation that might explode into violence, and trusting that a plan you helped design will actually work. Maman Gozi's eyes twinkled. Only a fool wouldn't be terrified. Then I'm a terrified fool who refuses to show it. That's called courage. Maman Gozi pressed the small charm she'd given Sade in Lagos into her palm. For luck. And if anyone tries anything foolish, aim for the eyes. I remember. The ceremony began at sunset. Sade walked down the aisle with her children beside her, Kento offering his arm with solemn dignity, Adora carrying a basket of flower petals, Amora attempting not to wave at everyone she passed and mostly failing. Sung-ho waited at the altar in a black traditional Korean hanbok embroidered with Nigerian patterns. The fusion was striking, ancient Korean silhouette meeting African symbolism, two heritage woven into a single garment that proclaimed his identity to the world. His eyes never left Sade's face. The officiant was a Buddhist monk who'd known Sung-ho's mother, his words carrying across the assembly with gentle authority. Marriage is not a contract but a covenant. Not a transaction but a transformation. Today, these two souls do not join together for the first time, they renew a bond that was never truly broken. Sade barely heard the words. She was watching Sung-ho's eyes. Watching for the signal that would tell her their enemies had made their move. It came during the exchange of vows. A slight tightening around his eyes. A barely perceptible nod. Somewhere in the compound, the trap was springing. Do you, Choi Sung-ho, take this woman as your wife? To protect, to cherish, to honor above all others until death separates you. I do. The words carried weight beyond their traditional meaning. A promise not just of love but of safety. Not just of partnership but of shared battle. And do you, Sade Adebayo Choi, take this man as your husband? To trust, to support, to stand beside through whatever trials may come. Sade thought of everything that had brought them to this moment. The love, the betrayal, the years of separation, the children who'd grown up without their father, the enemies who even now were being neutralized by Sung-ho's forces. I do. Then by the authority vested in me, I declare you. The explosion was distant but unmistakable. Guests screamed. Security teams mobilized. Chaos erupted through the perfectly planned ceremony. But Sade and Sung-ho didn't move. They stood at the altar, hands clasped, while the world fell apart around them. Because they both knew the truth, the explosion wasn't a threat to them. It was the end of the threat against them. Husband and wife, the monk finished calmly, apparently unbothered by the commotion. You may kiss the bride. Sung-ho kissed her with the same controlled intensity he brought to everything, thorough, possessive, absolutely devastating. When they parted, Captain Adiz was waiting at the altar's edge. It's done, she reported. J-Minute's team is neutralized. We have him in custody. Casualties? None on our side. 14 on theirs, all combatants. Adiz's expression flickered. Harene was with them. She's been detained separately. Sade felt no satisfaction. Only exhaustion and a hollow kind of relief. The children. Safe in the bunker. Unaware anything happened. Keep it that way. Sung-ho's voice was cold. This day is about celebration, not violence. Everyone in this garden will remember it as a beautiful ceremony interrupted by a minor disturbance quickly resolved. Understood. Adiz disappeared into the chaos. Sung-ho turned to face their guests, Sade's hand still clasped in his. His voice carried across the garden with effortless authority. My apologies for the interruption. A small security matter now resolved. Please, the celebration continues. The orchestra, apparently briefed for this possibility, immediately struck up triumphant music. Waiters circulated with fresh champagne. Slowly, uncertainly, the guests began to return to their conversations. But everyone understood what had just happened. The Choi family had been tested. And their enemies had been destroyed. The reckoning. Later that night. The guests were gone. The compound had been swept, secured, and declared safe. The children were asleep in their beds, exhausted from a celebration they'd experienced as pure joy, unaware of the violence that had played out beneath the surface. Now came the reckoning. Sade descended into the compound's lower levels alongside Sung-ho, her wedding dress exchanged for practical black clothing. The contrast felt appropriate. She'd spent the day being a bride, and now she would witness what it meant to be the wife of the silent sovereign. J-Minute waited in an interrogation room that looked more like an elegant study than a prison cell. He sat in a comfortable chair, hands cuffed to the armrests, looking considerably less confident than his voice had suggested during that threatening call. Cousin, he said as Sung-ho entered. Come to gloat. Come to understand. Sung-ho took the chair across from him. Sade remained standing near the door, watching. You've spent years building alliances against me. You've threatened my wife, my children, my legacy. I want to know why. Why? J-Minute laughed bitterly. Because this should have been mine. The empire, the power, the respect. My grandfather built the foundations. My father expanded into new territories. And when your father wanted an heir, he chose some orphan over his own bloodline. I was 3 years old. You were a stranger. A symbol. Proof that Choi Jae-won cared more about his reputation for generosity than his duty to family blood. J-Minute's voice hardened. And then you made it worse. Marrying that African woman. Mixing the bloodline with. Careful. Sung-ho's voice dropped to something lethal. Very, very careful. J-Minute fell silent. My wife is standing behind me, Sung-ho continued quietly. The mother of my children. The woman I've loved for a decade and will love until I die. If you finish that sentence, I will make your remaining hours extremely unpleasant. Remaining hours? You threatened my children, Jae-minute. You sent photographs with red circles around their faces. You promised that the sins of the father would be visited upon them. Sung-ho leaned forward. Did you think there would be any outcome where you survived that? The blood drained from Jae-minite's face. You can't kill me. The old families would never. The old families are currently deciding whether to send congratulations or condolences. They saw your forces fail spectacularly at my wedding. They saw your threat neutralized without a single casualty on my side. They're calculating whether opposing me is worth the obvious cost. They'll never accept you. Never accept her. This empire was built by pure Korean blood, and you've contaminated it with. Sade stepped forward. Jae-minute fell silent again, something in her expression stopping his words more effectively than Sung-ho's threats. My children, she said quietly, are not contamination. They're the future. The best of both worlds, both cultures, both bloodlines. And they will inherit everything you think belongs to you. This isn't your business, woman. This is between. This is entirely my business. Sade crouched to his level, her voice steady and cold. You threatened my babies. You tried to use them as leverage against their father. You wanted to hurt him. She leaned closer. I spent 5 years hiding from people like you. 5 years jumping at shadows, checking locks, teaching my children to run and hide on command. Do you know what that does to a mother? Do you understand the rage that builds when you can never feel safe, never relax, never stop looking over your shoulder? Jae-minite's breathing quickened. I'm not going to kill you, Sade said softly. That's not my role. But I want you to understand something before whatever happens next. I'm not the frightened woman who ran from Seoul 5 years ago. I'm not a victim. I'm not prey. She stood. I'm the mother of 3 children who carry the Choi legacy in their blood. And I will never let anyone threaten them again. She walked to the door without looking back. Sung-ho followed a moment later, leaving Jae-minute in the custody of security forces who would handle the next steps. In the corridor, he caught her arm. Are you all right? No. She was trembling, she realized. The adrenaline of the confrontation catching up with her. But I will be. When this is truly over. It's over. He pulled her against him. Jae-minute will face justice, legal justice, properly documented, impossible to challenge. RNA will be deported and blacklisted from every country where I have influence. The old families are already sending messengers to express their loyalty. And the threats against our children. Eliminated. Permanently. His arms tightened around her. They are safe, Sade. For the first time since they were born, they're truly safe. She broke. The tears she'd been holding back for days, weeks, years, finally spilled over. She sobbed against his chest, grief and relief and exhaustion pouring out in equal measure. Sung-ho held her through all of it, his presence solid and unwavering, his tattooed hands gentle on her back. When the storm finally passed, she looked up at him with swollen eyes and a trembling smile. We did it. We did it together. He kissed her forehead. Partners. In everything. Partners, she agreed. They climbed the stairs together, leaving the darkness of the lower levels behind, ascending toward the light of their waiting future. The morning after. The following morning. Sade woke to sunlight streaming through silk curtains and the distant sound of children's laughter. For a long moment, she lay still, orienting herself. The events of the previous day felt like a dream, the ceremony, the explosion, the confrontation, the tears. But the unfamiliar luxury of the master bedroom was real, as was the warmth of the man sleeping beside her. Sung-ho lay on his back, one arm thrown above his head, the other resting across her waist. In sleep, his face relaxed into something younger, softer. The tattoos that covered his arms seemed less threatening somehow, more like armor he could set aside than weapons permanently affixed. She studied him in the morning light, cataloguing the changes 5 years had wrought. Silver threads in his black hair. Faint lines around his eyes. A new scar on his jaw that hadn't been there before. What did he survive while I was gone? She wondered. What battles did he fight alone? His eyes opened. For a moment, he simply looked at her, that intense, focused attention that had terrified her 5 years ago and now felt like home. Good morning, wife. Good morning, husband. He smiled, rare, genuine, devastating. I wasn't dreaming, he said. You're really here. I'm really here. And the children? Laughing somewhere downstairs, from the sound of it. Probably terrorizing your kitchen staff. Our kitchen staff. He pulled her closer. Everything here is ours now. The compound. The empire. The future. That's a lot of hours. Not nearly enough. He kissed her softly. I plan to spend the rest of my life adding to the list. A crash from downstairs, followed by Amora's distinctive shriek of delighted laughter, interrupted the moment. Duty calls, Sade sighed. Let it wait. Sung-ho's arms tightened. 5 more minutes. Our children are destroying something expensive. I have many expensive things. They can destroy a few. But he released her with obvious reluctance. Tonight, we continue this conversation. Tonight, she agreed. They descended to the main floor to find controlled chaos. The triplets had discovered the compound's traditional Korean garden and were treating it like a personal playground. Kento was attempting to teach Ador a proper meditation posture beside a reflecting pool. Amora was chasing koi fish with gleeful determination. These children, Maman Gozi observed from a nearby bench, have absolutely no fear. It's wonderful and terrifying. They're safe now, Sade said. For the first time in their lives, they can just be children. Safe today. But what about tomorrow? Next year? When they're grown and inheriting all this? Maman Gozi's gesture encompassed the compound, the guards, the visible wealth. This world has a way of demanding payment. Then we'll prepare them. Sung-ho's voice came from behind them. Teach them to be strong enough to lead and wise enough to choose peace when possible. Maman Gozi studied him. You've thought about this. I've thought of nothing else for 3 years. He watched his children play, his children, still a novelty, still a wonder. They won't inherit my enemies. I'll eliminate every threat before they're old enough to face it. And they won't inherit my isolation, they'll have each other, their mother, a community built on loyalty instead of fear. Pretty words. Verifiable actions. He met the older woman's skeptical gaze. Watch me prove them. Maman Gozi was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, genuine, approving, slightly surprised. Perhaps you'll do after all, Choi Sung-ho. Perhaps you'll do just fine. The building years. 6 months later. Time moved differently in Seoul. Sade learned the rhythm of her new life gradually, like a language absorbed through immersion rather than study. Morning routines that now included security briefings. School runs to an elite international academy where her children learned beside the offspring of diplomats and CEOs. Afternoons divided between the charity foundation Sung-ho had established in their children's names and the new bakery she'd opened in Seoul's traditional district. You didn't have to work, Sung-ho had said when she'd announced her plans. You never have to work again if you don't want to. I want to work. This is who I am, a baker, a builder, someone who creates things with my hands. She touched his face gently. Just because I married an empire doesn't mean I need to become one. The Seoul bakery was different from Lagos, sleeker, more modern, catering to a clientele that expected perfection. But the heart of it was the same, fresh ingredients, honest craftsmanship, food made with love. She called it omelara, child is my wealth in Yoruba. The children thrived. Kento discovered a passion for architecture that went beyond childhood interest, spending hours studying building designs and construction techniques. His teachers called him frighteningly focused and recommended specialized programs. Adaora became obsessed with languages, absorbing Korean with terrifying speed and demanding tutors for Mandarin, French, and Arabic. If I'm going to help lead a global organization, she'd explain seriously, I need to communicate with everyone. Amora remained magnificently, gloriously herself, fearless, charismatic, equally comfortable charming diplomats at formal dinners and getting muddy in the compound garden. She would either become a beloved leader or a spectacular revolutionary, and no one was quite sure which. They're adapting better than I expected, Sade admitted to Sungho one evening. I worried the transition would be harder. Children are resilient. And these children have you, they've been learning to adapt their whole lives. They have you now too. She watched him across the dinner table, struck as she often was by how different this marriage felt from their first attempt. You're good with them. Patient. Present. I'm terrified with them. He smiled wryly. Every day I'm afraid of making mistakes, missing important moments, somehow damaging them with my inadequacy. That's what makes you good. You care enough to be scared. I was never scared before them. Before you. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I built an empire on fearlessness, the ability to face any threat without flinching. Now I flinch at everything. Every closed door, every stranger's glance, every cough or sneeze from any of them. That's called being a parent. It's called being in love. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. I never understood before. What my enemies might take from me. What I had to lose. You and the children, you've made me human again. Vulnerable. Real. Is that a complaint? It's gratitude. He lifted her hand to his lips. Thank you for coming back. For giving me this life I never knew I wanted. Sade's heart swelled. Thank you for finding me. For refusing to give up. For being someone worth coming back to. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, while outside the window Seoul sparkled like a city full of possibilities. The shadows return. 1 year later. The news arrived during breakfast. Sade was helping Amora choose between two identical-looking hair ribbons when Sungho's phone buzzed with the particular tone that meant security alert. His expression barely flickered, but she'd learned to read him, something was wrong. Children, finish your breakfast with Grandmother Ngozi, he said calmly. Maman Ngozi had relocated to Seoul 6 months ago, declaring herself too old to be separated from her grandchildren by continents. Your mother and I need to discuss something briefly. Is it about the bad people? Kento asked. There are no more bad people. Then why does your face look like that? Sungho paused. Sade watched him wrestle with the eternal parental dilemma of honesty versus protection. Some things require adult discussion, he said finally. Not because they're dangerous, because they're complicated. I'll explain more when there's something to explain. Kento nodded seriously, apparently satisfied. They retreated to Sungho's study. RNA is dead, he said without preamble. Killed in Thailand 3 days ago. Her body was found yesterday. Sade absorbed this. How? Professional. Clean. Made to look like robbery gone wrong. He pulled up files on his desk screen. But the pattern matches other deaths we've been tracking. 3 of J Minut's former lieutenants. 2 overseas contacts who funded his operation. All dead in the past 4 months. Someone's cleaning house. Someone's continuing J Minut's work. Sungho's voice was grim. Eliminating anyone who might talk. Cutting connections that could lead back to them. Back to who? J Minut is in prison. His organization was destroyed. His organization was neutralized. But we identified everyone involved. He shook his head. Someone remained hidden. Someone patient enough to wait a year before acting. Sade's stomach clenched. Other children in danger? Not immediately. Whoever this is, they're focused on covering tracks, not attacking us. But if they're trying to rebuild what we destroyed, eventually they'll need to deal with us too. Yes. She stood at the window, looking out at the garden where her children played most afternoons. I thought it was over. So did I. Sung-ho joined her at the window. I'm sorry. I promised you safety. I promised. You promised to protect our family. You're doing that now by identifying this threat before it becomes critical. She turned to face him. What do? We investigate. Carefully. Quietly. Find out who's behind this before they realize we know. And when we find them, we end it. Permanently. His expression was hard. No trial this time. No prison. Anyone who threatens our family disappears, and the world is better for it. Sade nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Continue as normal. Don't let the children sense anything wrong. Be alert but not paranoid. He touched her face. And trust me. Can you do that? I've always trusted you. She covered his hand with hers. Even when I ran because I trusted that you'd survive without me, that destroying my presence would protect you from your father's machinations. It nearly destroyed me instead. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. He kissed her forehead. We're here now. Together. That's all that matters. The hunter becomes hunted. 2 months later. The investigation revealed a ghost. Someone had been working inside Sung-ho's organization for years, long before HRNA's alliance with J-Minute, long before Sade's disappearance, long before anyone suspected there might be enemies closer than they knew. The leaks trace back to my father's era, Madame Kwon reported, her face grave. Someone he trusted implicitly. Someone who's been invisible this whole time. Suspects. 3. She placed files on the conference table. All longtime associates. All with access to sensitive information. All apparently above suspicion. Sade studied the photographs. Lee Chang-soo, the finance director. Bae Sung-minute, the international operations chief. And Kim Do-hyun, the head of internal security, the very person responsible for protecting the family from threats. If it's Kim, Sung-ho said quietly, we're more compromised than we realized. If it's Kim, Madame Kwon agreed, he knows everything we've done to investigate. Every step we've taken. Then we stop taking steps he can see. Sade spoke up. Use me. Both turned to look at her. I'm not part of the organization, she explained. I have my bakery, my own routines, my own contacts. If one of these men is the traitor, they're watching your operations, not mine. Sade. I can approach each of them socially. The finance director dines at a restaurant near my bakery. The operations chief has children at the same academy as ours. The security head. She hesitated. He's harder. But I can find an angle. This is dangerous. Everything is dangerous. At least this way, I'm dangerous back. Sung-ho was silent for a long moment. Madame Kwon. Your assessment. The older woman studied Sade with those sharp, evaluating eyes. She's capable. More capable than most people in this room, including some of your trained operatives. And she's right, using someone outside normal channels reduces the risk of detection. The risk to her can be managed. We provide backup she doesn't visibly connect to. We monitor everything without alerting the targets. Madame Kwon's gaze softened slightly. She's not the same frightened girl who ran 5 years ago, Sung-ho. Trust her capabilities. The silence stretched. Then Sung-ho nodded. We do this my way. You wear a tracker. You have extraction codes. You don't take unnecessary risks. Define unnecessary. Anything that puts you in physical danger without backup within 30 seconds. I can work with that. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. If anything happens to you. It won't. I'm the mother of the Choi heirs, remember? The most dangerous creature in nature. This isn't funny. No. But laughing helps me be brave. She kissed him softly. I'll be careful. I promise. The unmasking. 3 weeks later. Kim Do-hyun, head of internal security, was the traitor. Sade discovered it not through sophisticated espionage but through something simpler, body language. During a school fundraiser, she'd watched him interact with Kento, had seen the particular way he looked at her son, calculating rather than caring, assessing rather than appreciating. It was the same look Sung-ho's father had given her years ago. The look of someone seeing a chess piece instead of a person. I think it's Kim, she told Sung-ho that night. Evidence? Instinct. But strong instinct. She described what she'd seen. He looks at our children like problems to solve, not people to protect. And he was too interested in their routines, asked questions that went beyond professional security concerns. That's thin. Then verify it. But verify it carefully, using people Kim doesn't control. Sung-ho spent 2 weeks building a parallel investigation, agents Kim didn't know about, resources from overseas branches, contacts who owed loyalty to the Choi family rather than the organization's bureaucracy. The evidence was damning. Kim had been feeding information to Jae-min's faction for over a decade. He'd helped arrange the threats against Sung-ho's mother. He'd been instrumental in making sure Sade's letters never reached their intended recipient 5 years ago. Why? Sung-ho asked when they finally confronted him, deep in the same interrogation room where Jae-min had faced judgment. You've been with this family for 30 years. My father trusted you. Your father was weak. Kim's mask had dropped entirely, revealing contempt that must have been brewing for decades. He adopted an outsider. Let him marry foreign blood. Permitted the dilution of everything the Choi name should represent. So this was about purity? About bloodlines? It was about legacy. Kim's voice rose. Generations of careful cultivation, strategic marriages, building power through proper Korean channels, all of it destroyed because Jae-won had a sentimental attachment to some orphan. That orphan is me. That orphan should never have been allowed near the center of power. Kim's gaze flickered to Sade, standing behind Sung-ho. And she should have been eliminated the moment she became pregnant. I recommended it to Jae-won. He was too weak to act. But my father did act. He drove her away. And failed to finish the job. Failed to eliminate the children. Failed to cleanse the bloodline once and for all. Kim smiled bitterly. I spent 5 years helping Jae-min build his coalition. 5 years waiting for the right moment to correct Jae-won's mistakes. And now? Now you'll kill me. I know how this works. I've arranged it often enough myself. He met Sung-ho's eyes steadily. Do it. But know that killing me won't change anything. Others believe as I believe. They'll continue the work. Sung-ho was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Sade. What do you think? She stepped forward, studying the man who had conspired against her family for half his life. He's not wrong that killing him won't end the ideology, she said quietly. There will always be people who believe purity matters more than character. Who see mixed heritage as weakness rather than strength. Then what do you suggest? Don't make him a martyr. Don't give his followers a reason to believe their cause is righteous. She met Kim's surprised gaze. Put him on trial. Publicly. Let everyone see what his pure ideology actually looks like, a man who threatened children, betrayed colleagues, conspired against the family he'd sworn to protect. You'd humiliate me rather than kill me. I'd expose you. Let your beliefs be judged in the light of day rather than whispered in shadows. Sade's voice hardened. Because you're not wrong that there are others who think like you. But there are also people watching, undecided, capable of being swayed either direction. Show them what happens to traitors. Show them that the Choi family is strong enough to face its enemies in public. Kim's expression flickered. He hadn't expected mercy. He hadn't expected wisdom. And he definitely hadn't expected it from her. "You've changed," he said finally. From the frightened girl who ran away. "I was never just that." She held his gaze. "You just never bothered to look deeper." The trial. 1 month later. Kim Do-hyun's trial was the most publicized legal proceeding in Korean history. Every detail was documented: his decades of betrayal, his coordination with Jae-minute, his targeting of children, his ideological motivations. Witnesses testified about conversations they'd overheard, orders they'd received, suspicions they'd harbored but been too afraid to voice. Sade testified as well. She stood before the court and described the terror of living under constant threat. The decision to flee to protect her unborn children. The years of hiding, the vigilance, the way her children had grown up learning emergency protocols before they learned to read. "I was 23 years old," she said, her voice steady. "Pregnant with triplets, newly married, trying to make a life in a country where I knew no one except my husband. And instead of finding safety in his family's protection, I found that his own people wanted to eliminate me and my children." She looked directly at Kim, seated at the defense table. "You took 5 years from us. 5 years where my children didn't know their father. 5 years where my husband believed I'd abandoned him. 5 years of fear and isolation and wondering if today would be the day someone found us." Her voice hardened. "You don't get to be a martyr for that. You don't get the dignity of a quiet death, your beliefs intact, your followers able to claim you died for a righteous cause. You get to be exposed. Judged. Remembered not as a warrior for purity but as a coward who threatened babies." The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict was guilty on all counts: conspiracy, attempted murder, treason against the Choi organization, which, while not technically illegal, carried consequences within certain circles that were far more severe than any legal punishment. The sentence was life imprisonment in a facility designed specifically for those who betrayed major organizations, comfortable enough to prevent martyrdom claims, secure enough to prevent escape, isolated enough to ensure his followers could never reach him. "It's over," Sung-ho said that night, holding Sade in the darkness of their bedroom. "Finally. Completely. Over. Is it ever really over?" She pressed her face against his chest. "There will always be people who hate us for existing. Who see our children as abominations rather than blessings. Then we'll face them. Together. As many times as necessary, for as long as necessary." He stroked her hair. "But tonight, we rest. We've earned it." Sade closed her eyes. For the first time in nearly 6 years, she slept without fear. The future unfolds. 5 years later. The children were 10 years old, and the world was unrecognizable from the one Sade had fled a decade earlier. Kento had developed into a serious, thoughtful boy whose architectural designs had already won regional competitions. He approached everything with his father's intensity but his mother's warmth, controlled fire rather than cold ice. Adora spoke 7 languages fluently and had started learning an 8th. She served as translator during Sung-ho's international calls, her understanding of nuance and diplomacy already sophisticated beyond her years. And Amora, beautiful, chaotic, irrepressible Amora, had discovered a passion for social justice that terrified her parents even as it made them proud. At 10, she was already organizing charity drives, speaking at fundraising events, and demanding to know why more people didn't help those who needed it. "She's going to be trouble," Sung-ho observed, watching Amora deliver an impassioned speech to a group of bemused executives about environmental responsibility. "She's going to be magnificent." Sade smiled. "They all are. They have their mother's heart. And their father's power." She slipped her hand into his. "Together, they'll be unstoppable." The Choi organization had transformed under their leadership. legitimate businesses had expanded while shadow operations had contracted. The foundation established in the children's names now operated in 12 countries, providing education and healthcare to communities that needed it most. "You've changed everything," Madame Kwon observed one evening. She was elderly now, retired from active operations, but still present as an advisor and honorary grandmother. "The Choi empire your father built was a weapon. What you've created is something else entirely. What would you call it?" "A family." The old woman smiled. "An actual family, with all the chaos and love and complications that implies." Jae-won would be horrified. "Good." Sung-ho's voice carried no bitterness, only peace. "He deserves to be horrified. And I deserve to be free of trying to earn his approval." The eternal vow. Their 10th anniversary. The celebration was private, just immediate family in the traditional garden where they'd renewed their vows 5 years earlier. No politics. No power plays. No 500 guests calculating angles. Just them. Maman Ngozi had flown in from Lagos, where she still maintained her apartment despite spending most of her time in Seoul. Madame Kwon sat in a place of honor, wrapped in blankets despite the warm evening. Captain Adiz, retired from active duty, was there with her husband and their twin daughters. And in the center of it all, 3 10-year-olds who understood that today was important but weren't entirely sure why. 10 years, Sade said, standing before the same altar where they'd married twice before. Some of them spent together. Some apart. But all of them spent loving you. Sung-ho's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "I spent the years apart learning how to be worthy of you," he said. "Building something you could be proud of. Becoming the man you deserved. You were always that man. I was just too young and scared to see it. We were both too young. Too wounded. Too shaped by families who'd failed us." He took her hands, those tattooed hands that had once terrified her and now felt like home. "But we're not young anymore. And our family won't fail us." "No," she agreed. "It won't." They exchanged rings, new ones, designed together, incorporating symbols from both their heritages. The bands were platinum inlaid with gold, engraved with 3 small infinity symbols representing their children. "With these rings," Sung-ho said, "I promise you the next 10 years. And the 10 after that. And every year I have remaining until my body returns to the earth." "With this ring," Sade replied, "I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes. To fight when necessary. To heal when possible. To love always, in all ways, until my last breath." They kissed as their children cheered, as Maman Ngozi wept, as Madame Kwon smiled with satisfaction at a story well concluded. But it wasn't concluded. It was continuing. Every day, every year, every generation that would follow, the story of the baker's daughter and the Mafia boss's son joined across continents and cultures, building something stronger than either could have created alone. The legacy. 20 years later. Choi Kento stood in his father's study, now his own, reviewing expansion plans for the family's legitimate business holdings. At 30, he'd grown into exactly the leader everyone had predicted, controlled, strategic, but with a warmth his father had learned to show and his mother had always possessed. A knock at the door. "Come in." His mother entered, silver threading her natural hair, lines around her eyes that somehow only made her more beautiful. She wore simple clothing, she'd never embraced the designer lifestyle that her position afforded, and carried a familiar scent of fresh bread from the bakery she still visited most mornings. "Your sister called," she said. "Amora. She's been arrested again." Kento sighed. "What is it this time?" "Chaining herself to a drilling platform in the Arctic. Apparently she felt the company's environmental practices were insufficiently reformed despite the agreement they signed last month." "The agreement we brokered." "The very same." Sade smiled. "She says you were too lenient. Didn't push hard enough." "I pushed as hard as I could without starting an international incident." And she felt an international incident was precisely what the situation required. Sade sat across from him. I've already arranged for lawyers. She'll be out in a few hours. And Adaora. In Geneva, mediating something or other. She sends her love and says she'll visit next month if she can extract herself from the UN negotiations. Kento shook his head, but he was smiling. We're quite a family. We are. Sade reached across the desk, touching his hand. Your father would be proud. Is proud, he's watching all of you, wherever he is. Sung-ho had passed 3 years earlier, peacefully, surrounded by his family, having finally learned to rest after a lifetime of vigilance. His death had been mourned worldwide, his legacy celebrated, his children positioned to continue everything he'd built. I miss him, Kento admitted. I know. So do I. Sade's eyes glistened. But he's still here, in everything you do. In the way you protect this family. In the way you balance power with compassion. In the way you look at problems, seeing not obstacles but opportunities. He taught me that. We both did. She squeezed his hand. And now you'll teach the next generation. That's how it works. That's the only immortality any of us really get. The sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in colors that reminded Kento of Nigerian sunsets his mother had described, warm oranges and deep purples, horizons without end. Do you ever regret it? He asked suddenly. Any of it? The choices you made, the world you entered. Sade was quiet for a moment, considering. I regret the years apart, she said finally. The time I lost with your father. The fear that dominated so much of your early childhood. But regret the choice to have you? To have your sisters? To build this family despite everything trying to destroy it? She smiled. Never. Not for one moment. Not for one breath. Kento nodded, something in his chest releasing. Thank you. For everything. Thank you. She rose, pressing a kiss to his forehead. For making it all worthwhile. She left him to his work, walking through hallways that held 30 years of memories, photographs on walls, children's art preserved under glass, the tangible evidence of a life built against all odds. In her pocket, she still carried the charm Mama Ngozi had given her so long ago. The older woman was gone now too, passed peacefully in her sleep with a smile on her face, surrounded by the grandchildren she'd helped raise. For courage, she'd said. And if anyone tries anything foolish, aim for the eyes. Sade smiled at the memory. She'd needed courage. She'd needed foolishness, the kind that made a woman burn everything and disappear, the kind that made her return when leaving would have been safer, the kind that made her stand beside a dangerous man and build a family in a world that wanted to destroy them. But most of all, she'd needed love. And love, stubborn, illogical, unstoppable love, had seen her through. She stepped out onto the balcony overlooking Seoul's skyline. Somewhere in this city, her daughter was being released from custody, probably already planning her next act of spectacular defiance. Somewhere across the world, her other daughter was forging peace between nations. And here, in the heart of what they'd built, her son was continuing the work of 3 generations. We made it, she thought. Against everything. Despite everything. We made it. The sun sank below the horizon. Stars emerged, one by one, like promises being fulfilled. And Choi Sade, baker, mother, wife, warrior, watched them appear and knew that this was only the end of one chapter. The story continued. It always would.